lest thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun, and the moon, and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldst be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven.
Oh, glorious Son! Accept our sacrifice, that we may be fruitful once again!
And it shall be, if thou do at all forget the Lord thy God, and walk after other gods, and serve them, and worship them, I testify against you this day, that ye shall surely perish. As the nations which the Lord destroyeth before your face, so shall ye perish, because ye would not be obedient unto the voice of the Lord your God.
Has Rome changed the times? Absolutely. Which times has it changed? Just about everything. Which calendar are we keeping? We are keeping the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar. Who was Gregory? He was a pope. Why did Gregory change the calendar? Because he had to change the times. You see? He had to change the times. Now today is a good day to talk about this because today is the feast of Ishtar. Oh, sorry. Let's rephrase that. Today is Easter. And the feast of Ishtar and Easter are two very different things. Easter, there is no such thing. You see, the Pasch was determined, the Passover was determined by the phases of the moon. And the day of the Passover was determined by the new moon. So when the new moon came, then the days were counted, and the Passover could take place on any day. It didn't have to be a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday. The Passover could take place on any day, depending on the phase of the new moon. But the feast of Ishtar was on the first day of the week. So the papacy changed the calendar in order to bring it in line with the feast of Ishtar. And today, they've changed the rule of the Old Testament, where you count the days, and made it apply so that Ishtar can only fall on a Sunday, whereas in the past it could fall on any day. Now, that is saying that they distantiate themselves from the Passover lamb. Even worse. If you now, by chance, that the feast of Easter and the feast of the Passover happen to coincide and be on the same day, so the Pope then postpones Easter by 1 week. So he changed the feast days, he changed the times so that it can fall into line with that, he changed the whole calendar to bring it in line with the pagan feasts, and he changed the law of God.
Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. Because I will publish the name of the Lord. Ascribe ye greatness unto our God. He is the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment. A God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. They have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. They are a perverse and crooked generation. Do ye thus requite the Lord, O foolish people and unwise? Is not he thy father that hath bought thee? Hath he not made thee and established thee? For they are a very froward generation, children in whom is no faith. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities. And I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. For a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn unto the lowest hell. And he shall say, Where are their gods, their rock in whom they trusted, which did eat the fat of their sacrifices, and drank the wine of their drink offerings? Let them rise up and help you, and be your protection. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God with me. I kill, and I make alive. I wound, and I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand. For I lift up my hand to heaven and say, I live forever. If I whet my glittering sword, and mine hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to mine enemies, and will reward them that hate me.
The worship of the sun is arguably the most prominent and unifying characteristic of nearly all non-biblical religions, and to this day, the sun remains a central object of worship and adoration within the New Age and all other forms of pagan and occult spirituality.
Our sun, you see, which is to us a god in that it's our main station of light. Zoroastrianism recognized the supreme god of light, Ahura Mazda, was the ultimate god. Even the Aztecs, they're known for their sort of slaughter and sacrifices to the sun.
According to the Old Testament, God finds sun worship to be among the most abominable of all practices. Most of the major pagan gods mentioned in the Old Testament, such as Baal, Ishtar, and Molech, were associated with the sun. And even though God warned his people against sun and other similar forms of idolatry, it remained a consistent stumbling block for the Israelites. Like the Israelites in the Old Testament, Christians throughout history have consistently fallen into sun idolatry, and it has been particularly prominent within the Roman Catholic Church. St. Peter's Square in the Vatican is in fact a giant pagan sundial or sun wheel, with an authentic ancient Egyptian obelisk in the center, acting as the gnomon, which casts a shadow as the sun moves across the sky. In addition, St. Peter's Square depicts both the even-armed cross, or the cross of the zodiac, which represents the sun and the two equinoxes and two solstices, important seasonal markers in pagan spirituality, as well as the eight-pointed star of Ishtar, the supreme light goddess of the Babylonians, who survives today in various forms, such as the Statue of Liberty and the Columbia Pictures logo. The worship of the sun has direct correlations with the worship of Lucifer. This is true in many ways. Firstly, the sun as the great and radiant orb of day correlates with Lucifer's identity as the great angel of light, and both have been worshipped in identical ways.
The Romans and the Greeks were so used to being surrounded by symbols of their deities. They began doing the same thing with Christianity. So many of these new converts just relabeled their idols with Christian names, like Paul, Mary, and Peter.
A statue of Jupiter became a statue of Peter.
And we know that because it has a sun disk right over its head that indicates that this is not Peter, but it's a pagan statue that's been renamed.
The representations of Isis, which is originally an Egyptian goddess but has become very Greek already, becomes essentially the representation of Mary carrying her child.
You have a mother and child tradition all the way down through history. You have it in Mithraism, you have it in Babylon, you have it all the way back in Persia.
It appears that Mary acquired some of the characteristics that were associated with some of these other goddesses.
She wears a dark blue coat and she stands on the half moon. She is the mother of all gods. Isis carrying her son Horus. That is the image that gets a new name, and now the name is Mary carrying the child Jesus.
Or a depiction of the god Hermes is shown as Christ the Good Shepherd.
Soon the statues of the saints and even Jesus began adorning the churches. Even though God clearly forbids this practice in the Ten Commandments, people continued to revere and to pray to these relabeled idols.
The children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtoreth.
And so what happens is you're going to see similarities now between the holiday of Easter and the traditions that we celebrate during Easter, and all of these traditions that date back 2, 3, and 4,000 years ago. So right off the bat, we discover that the Easter Bunny comes from that one act that Semiramis did when she broke out of the egg. Let's see if we can find some other traditions as we move along here. Now, every spring, the first Sunday after the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, they have what was called Ishtar's Sunday. At the sunrise service, the priest of Ishtar would impregnate young virgins on the altar, and during that same service, they would take the babies that were now 3-month-old from the previous year, and they would sacrifice those children on the altar to Ishtar, and then they would take the eggs of Ishtar, and they would dip those eggs in the blood of those young infants. And that is where we get sunrise services, and that is potentially where we get the dyeing of Easter eggs. It is also interesting to note that worldwide universal color of Easter eggs is red. And yes, the 40 days prior to Easter, where we call it Lent, or the Catholics call it Lent, that 40 days did not come from, my friends, the 40 days of Jesus in the wilderness. That 40 days was already in place for thousands of years before Jesus even showed up. It comes from the 40 days of fasting and praying for Tammuz before they celebrated Easter. The 40 days of the fasting and praying of Jesus, and I like to call him by his Hebrew name, Yeshua, which means salvation. Yeshua's fasting and praying in the wilderness for 40 days is just a coincidence. Why? Because the Father knows the truth, and the enemy used to be the right-hand man of the Father. And he knows the prophecies. He knew exactly how everything was going to be laid out. So he developed all of these traditions of men and all of these legends, whether they be true or not true, but he developed them to skew our foresight and our ability to understand that when the truth would actually come, that we would not recognize it. First of all, in Egypt, they were known as Isis and Osiris. In Phoenicia, they were recognized as Asheroth and Baal, the very same Asheroth and Baal that you see in the Scriptures. In Greece, they were Aphrodite and Adonis, or Eros, where we get the word erotic from. And in Rome, they were called Venus and Cupid. That's right, that's where we get Valentine's Day from, and Cupid. Even in the Far East, listen to this. This is amazing. Cupid was known as Zoroaster. Zoroaster is made up of two words, Zoro, which means seed of, and Asheroth, which is Easter. And so what Cupid actually means in the Far East is the seed of Easter, or the seed of his mother. Okay. We're going to start off with a myriad of symbols that we have discovered in archaeology and history that are very related to Christianity in Christmas and Easter, sun god worship, and pagan worship today. So we're going to start off with the most obvious one, or the most important one, and that is Tammuz and his mother, Semiramis. If you look on your screen, you're going to see Isis and Osiris, or this is Ishtar and Tammuz. Now, some of you may be asking, well, wait a minute, I celebrate Easter. You're talking about Ishtar. Easter is actually the Anglicization of the word Ishtar. In other words, if you say Ishtar in English, it's pronounced Easter. That's how the etymology of that word evolved over time. What I want you to see is, I want you to see what's on her head is a crescent moon, and in the center of that crescent moon is the actual sun itself. And so the symbol of power of Isis, or Ishtar, was the crescent moon holding the sun itself, her deceased husband, Baal, the sun god. And you can see the baby there that is nursing from her breast. Ishtar was known as the goddess of the East, the bare-breasted fertility god of the East, or the sunrise, which is why they had the service at sunrise on Easter morning. Her husband, on the other hand, was the god of the West, the setting sun. And so you had the goddess, the wife, Easter, of the sunrise, and then you had her husband, which is the god of the West, on the sunset, covering all day long, that the pagan sun gods would rule the earth. Now, as you see that the main symbol for the sun god was the crescent moon with the sun on the top of it, or centered and cradled inside that crescent moon, We now move to something that's a bit controversial but very true historically, is the Catholic Eucharist is actually the sun that is inside of that crescent moon. We're going to show you some pictures of the actual Eucharist in different positions, and you're going to see that not only is it similar, it's identical. This is where they got the symbols from. You can see here, this is a particular object that holds the Eucharist, and I found this online, and this is what the quote said. I left off the particular church for obvious reasons, but this was their advertisement for a particular Friday. It says, Eucharistic adoration is held on the first Friday of every month for the purpose of honoring and praying to the Blessed Sacrament. Now, I don't know about you, but my Bible says to pray to the Father, our Father. Yeshua, Jesus, said to pray to the Father. He did not say to pray to inanimate objects, whether they represent Him or not. Now, look very carefully at, on the right-hand side, you can see the moon, the crescent moon shaped, holding that sun or that wafer of bread. Here's a close-up of it right here. The crescent moon cradle with the sun-shaped monstrance of the Roman Catholic Church. And now you'll see that it's actually the rays of the sun go all the way around this. They didn't hide it at all. Why did they not hide it? Because this is thousands of years old. This comes right out of paganism and sun god worship, where it was the symbol of Baal and his wife Ishtar.
And it's really extraordinary to notice that all churches use that same symbol. And all over the world, people do not realize that this cross that they think represents Christianity is actually over 5,000 years old. It's an ancient, prehistoric symbol of the sun. Looking at the communion host, the Catholic communion host, you will see it always looks like the old ancient petroglyph sun. You see that the sun in Jesus' hand represents the S-U-N. The Holy Eucharist represents the sun. This is why the priest in the church on Sundays will raise the sun, they will raise it. And why? Because that's what the sun does, it rises. So the sun rises. This is why we have the symbols on the host in the Catholic Church. It is always the old petroglyph sun. Jesus means God is with us. And you will see the priest is representing Jesus. How? As a sun. All of this goes back many, many thousands and thousands of years before Christianity ever existed. It has nothing to do with Christianity at all. It has to do with exactly what it's showing, sun worship.
The Catholic Church is replete with all kinds of sun symbols. You'll always see the Pope wearing large sun symbols. It's on his hand, it's on his gloves, it's on the outside of churches. It's at the top of churches also, implying the sun is risen, and the sun rays are dominating the Catholic Church all over the world. It's the mother holding her son, and here in the Vatican is a very interesting picture of, this is a sculpture in the Vatican, and it is showing Jesus' mother, the Virgin, which is Virgo, the Virgin of the zodiac, holding her newborn son, S-U-N. And this is in the Vatican.
Was the god Osiris, and here you have some interesting symbols on the mitre of the Pope. There you have the symbol of the sun god. That's one of the main symbols of the sun deity, with the four spokes within a circle. And that over there is a cross, which is known as the Maltese cross. And the Knights of Malta wear that particular cross. And we will see that that particular cross, look at it carefully, is a direct symbol of the sun deity. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. Well, let's go there. Here is one of the kings of ancient times. And this is an Assyrian king, Sargon. What has he got around his neck? Can you see it? This is in the British Museum. There you have the Maltese cross, which is the same cross that the Pope has on his side. And he's pointing here with his finger, like this. which is also a symbol of the one, meaning the one deity, the number one, the one stands for the sun god. There you have the symbol which we just saw on the mitre of the Pope, symbol of the sun god. There's another symbol. You have the compass, the set square and the compass, which you find in Freemasonry. Over there you have the half moon with the sickle in it, which you find in many religions. There you have the multi-layered one, as you find in the Aztec religions of sun worship. And there you have the triple mitre, the three aspects of the sun god. Well, the papacy also claims that he has the keys, and he calls them the keys of Peter. They are the Petra keys, because there they are in Babylon with the lion god, the keys to heaven and to hell. Do you remember that he said that the sentence of the priest is preeminent and that God has to subscribe to it? So it is the system that determines whether you go to heaven or whether you are lost, and not God. Now, there you have another symbol of the lion god over there in ancient times. So the keys are a symbol of the lion. Interesting stuff that this lion god is wearing or carrying. All these ancient deities and the high priests of these deities carry such staffs with a pine cone on the top, because the pine cone is a symbol of fertility. So now if we go into the rituals of how they treated the high priest, who was a reincarnation, just like the Pharaoh, of Osiris, and therefore a representative of Osiris in the form of Horus, if you like, on this earth. In the ancient cultures, they were carried, normally in a stool like this, and associated with it you had fans, which consisted of feathers. They could be peacock feathers, and the eye on the peacock feather is the eye of the all-wise one, of the deity they worship. Or it could be ostrich feathers, because the feather is associated with the bird, which in the final analysis leads us back to the phoenix, but we'll come to that a little bit later. Now there's the papacy, and here you have Pope Pius still being carried around in this very fashion, exactly like in pagan times, with exactly the same rituals, with the twin keys, which come from Babylon.
Who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples and said, Behold, my mother and my brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment.
Believe me, woman, the time will come when people will not worship the Father either on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans do not really know whom you worship, but we Jews know whom we worship, because it is from the Jews that salvation comes. But the time is coming, and is already here, when by the power of God's Spirit, people will worship the Father as he really is, offering him the true worship that he wants. God is Spirit, and only by the power of his Spirit can people worship him as he really is.